Good morning, everyone. I'm Kendall Trump with Grain Journal Magazine in Decatur, Illinois. Welcome to Why Are They Still Entering Grain Bins? This is the second in a series of webinars to be presented by GEAPS and Grain Journal Magazine in 2019. Each year, grain bin fatalities are still occurring throughout the nation. No matter how well you are prepared, entering a grain bin is always a risk. Today's webinar will take an in-depth look at the reasons why. We do hope to see you at the GEAPS Exchange 2019, which will be held March 9th through 12th in New Orleans, Louisiana. It's coming up. Today's webinar is sponsored by M&M Specialty Services. M&M specializes in protecting your people and your products with the best in quality and affordability in personal protection products, grain protectants, fumigants, and services. They are based in Leavenworth, Kansas. This webinar is also sponsored by VAA LLC, who has provided engineering and design services in the agribusiness industry since its founding in 1978. Working with owners, equipment vendors, and design build contractors, the firm specializes in bulk commodity handling facilities, including slip form design, material handling, transportation, and export. They are based in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Our presenter today is Dr. Carol Jones. Dr. Jones joined the Biosystems and Ag Engineering Department faculty at OSU in the summer of 2006. Dr. Jones's research and extension programs include grain and agricultural product storage and handling, electromagnetic sensing, modeling of forces in temperature and air movement within storage structures, safety and rescue techniques and equipment for grain storage facilities, and equipment, training, and research in pest management for grain and seed storage and handling. Dr. Jones's research and extension program is known internationally. She is one of only a few university grain storage experts in the United States and focuses on methods to keep grain and seed in the best condition possible. There is the connection between grain condition and safety for both structures and workers is a strong motivation for the equipment research and training she provides. Please feel free to ask questions at any time during today's presentation by typing them into the questions box at the right-hand side of your screen. We will be answering your questions during a Q&A session following our presentation. We do have one polling question for you today. How many people are viewing at your location? Thank you for your participation. As a note, this webinar is being recorded and it will be posted to our website, grainnet.com, within 24 hours. All registrants will also receive an email containing a link to the recording and the presentation slides. Dr. Carol, can you please do a voice check?
Okay, can you hear me, Kendall?
Yes, I can. And now can you please show us your screen?
Okay. How's that?
Great. Ladies and gentlemen, here is Dr. Carol Jones. Oh, your screen went away again. I think we need to...
All right. How's that? Let's see.
Let's try one more time.
Okay. How's that?
Looks good.
Okay. All right. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you this morning. I hope you've had that second cup of coffee, or maybe I'm standing between you and lunch, but it's a pleasure to be with you. A little bit about what I do here at Oklahoma State. Kendall covered a lot of that, but our focus here is on keeping people safe in grain bins and the science behind that, the equipment involved, and we work with some of the very best people in the world, and you out there in the audience are amongst those people. So I'm going to cover some real generalities today. You're the experts on your facility. Nobody knows your facility better than the managers at those facilities and the people who work for you. I think our facilities become almost a member of the family, and we're fiercely proud of them, as we should be. And when we have an incident that occurs, it hits us in the heart. It's a very sad, sad day if we lose someone or cause a change in their lifestyle due to an entanglement or dismemberment. So we take this quite personally, and hopefully some of the things that I talk about today you can adapt to your facilities. Maybe it'll help you keep your employees safe, yourself safe, and go home at the end of the day. So let me get into my PowerPoint here. We see these news flashes that always frustrate me. They say, let me go back one slide, employee just fell into a grain bin. Really? I don't think so. That might happen once every now and then, but not every time we see a news coverage of an entrapment or an entanglement. It's pretty hard to fall in one of these entrances. Most of us don't even fit into some of those entrances anymore, and I include myself in that. We have approximately 30 deaths a year in the U.S., and maybe twice that number in accidents or incidents for entrapments, entanglements. We don't even count or even get reports of a lot of the incidents that happen if they don't end up in a death.
Dr. Jones, I'm sorry to interrupt. We've lost your screen again.
Okay.
Let me go ahead.
Are we back?
Yep, we're back.
Okay, all right. We have technical difficulties, but we'll get through this. So picking up where I was at, the entanglements and the near misses most of the time don't get reported, and not all of our incidents happen in grain bins. Some of our most serious ones here in Oklahoma have been in grain carts, gravity wagons, and grain trucks. We lost some children just recently this year in a truck. So anywhere the grain is or might be moving is where we can assume that there is a danger for entrapment, engulfment, and we need to follow some really careful guidelines. Will we ever be 100% on this? Boy, I sure hope so, but I don't know whether I hold out a lot of faith for that. But I think we can go a long way into reducing the number of deaths and really tragedies that happen around our grain handling facilities. So what really happens? We know that people don't just fall into a bin, walking down the main street and happen upon a bin and just fall into it. So what really happens? Generally, our incidents happen when the grain's gone out of condition. The material's stuck on the walls. Perhaps we're walking down grain, which we shouldn't be doing in the first place, but it's a very common practice. Maybe the auger's running, so we get pulled into the flow of the grain. Only takes about 4 seconds to be up to your knees and less than 20 seconds to be completely engulfed. And your chances of survival, a complete engulfment, are really, really slim. That's a real tragedy. Maybe we have a bridge that broke through. Corn, soybeans, milo really have a tendency to bridge, meaning that if you looked into the bin, it looks like nothing's been removed from the bin, where in fact there's a big cavern under the surface, and the likelihood that you're going to break through that if you stand on it is quite high. So those are 3 of the ways. There are other ways that we have incidents in bins as well.
We lost your screen again. Apologies.
Okay. Not sure what's going on there. Okay. Back?
Yep.
Okay. Let me see if I can make my slide change without doing, now I've got to click on my presentation, so let's see.
Yep, we lost it again.
Okay, is it back now?
Yes.
I'm going to have to turn it back on every time I change a slide, so.
Okay, I can let you know through the chat window when it goes out.
All right, I'll keep an eye on it. Let me bring that up. Okay, got it. All right, so look at some of our pictures there on the side. Those are scary, scary pictures, especially that first one up in the top left-hand corner. Clearly, there's been some bad conditions conditioned grain in this picture, and of course that individual is not wearing his harness. He's totally unprotected. He probably shouldn't be in there in the first place. But this is a common scenario, whether it's a large bin like this one or one of our small farm bins. We have crusted, out-of-condition grain, and in order to get that to break up and go down through the reclaim system, some kind of intervention has to happen. And 9 times out of 10, that intervention is going to be a person entering the bin. We do have some equipment that we can use to keep people out of the bins, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But first I wanted to talk about some of this out-of-condition grain. It really occurs when we're cleaning out a bin, unloading a bin, down to the point where we're cleaning out a bin. If you want to see some really interesting coverage of this, go out on YouTube and just search for grain bin cleaning. And I think every FFA or 4-H kid out there has put a YouTube out there about cleaning out the family farm grain bin, and they're really entertaining, but there's some scary stuff that goes on out there on our farms. And as Bill Fields in his Purdue information that he publishes will note that many of our fatalities, our incidences happen on family farms, and we can talk about why that happens, but it's just a really sad day. So it happens when we're in the bin trying to remediate these chunks, clean out the bin. Maybe we're dislodging the bridges or the walls. Maybe the sweep auger is not one of the zero entry augers and it's stuck, and somehow we've got to dislodge it to completely empty out that bin. Maybe we're fumigating and something goes wrong with the fumigation. Maybe we're not monitoring close enough and we're overcome by some bad air quality. Maybe we've had an equipment or a structural failure that needs to be attended to with grain in the bin. So these are reasons that people go into a bin. I'm sure there may be others that you can think of in your facility, but these are ones that seem to be quite common. As we look at the middle and the bottom pictures there, the middle picture, that doesn't look too bad. We've got a good angle of repose in part of the pile. There's some peaks there, but if we take a different angle of that same bin, we see that this grain has some quality problems. Those tight peaks indicate a really tall angle of repose. Those are areas that are going to need some assistance to go down into the reclaim system. Probably they have either mold or high moisture content, foreign material areas in the grain. It's going to give us a problem. Okay, let me get to the next slide here. Kendall, can you see that?
I'm having my own technical difficulties over here. I apologize.
It shows on my screen that you can see it, so let me know if you can't, and I'll keep going here. So how can we prevent these problems, these grain conditioning problems from happening? And our answer, the pat answer to that is put in good grain. And we all endeavor to do that, on a day-to-day basis, we all know that we don't always have good grain to put in the bins, but the conditions going into the bin are really important, because that condition never ever improves. There's only 2 things that can happen. It stays the same or it gets worse. Now we can add value to that product but by doing different things to it. We can blend it, turn it into feed, market it at the right time, whatever. But the condition of the grain itself never improves in storage. So we want to keep it from getting worse. And there's some ways we can do that. Aeration is one of our first lines of defense in a grain situation, particularly if we have moisture issues. Most of our incidents happen in the Midwest, upper Midwest, the corn, wheat, soybean growing areas, milo growing areas of the United States, and that happens to be where our biggest temperature fluctuations happen. It's not uncommon to start the day at 30 degrees or less, and especially this winter, maybe less than 0 for some of us, and get up to 50 or 60 degrees during the day. And so condensation is really a problem, and the way we handle that is with good aeration management. That can be through an aeration system, exhaust fans up on the roof. We need to know when to run those aeration systems and how they all work together. All of this grain management situation is exactly that. It's a system, and it all works together, from the condition of the grain going in, from the equipment that you use to handle it, from the housekeeping discipline that you have in your facility, to when you actually sell the grain. This is all part of a whole system, and one affects the other so directly that it all has an impact. So someone in your facility needs to be very familiar with your aeration system and how it works. They need to know about equivalent moisture content and the relative humidity and how that crop interacts with air quality, and how your aeration system is designed to take care of that. Whether you have an automatic controller that does that automatically for you, or whether you yourself are the automatic controller that goes out and flips on the switch, are you sure that you understand when you're really using that system effectively? Might be time to brush up on some of the habits of handling your aeration system. Monitoring. Why do you need to monitor? Well, you can't manage what you don't know is there, so we can't fix it if we don't know we have a problem. Your temperature cables, air quality monitors, actually your nose, are all good indicators of quality monitoring. We even have insect monitors now that are electronic, that can tell you about your population dynamics, whether you're getting more insects or less insects. So all of these you need to use very conscientiously, understand what it is they're measuring, understand their limitations. In our large bins, 90 foot and larger, now we need more temperature cables. And I know that's expensive, but a temperature cable is only good for a couple of foot diameter around it, around the thermocouple. So we need to know those limitations and know how your bin is constructed, where the temperature cables are, what it is that they're actually monitoring, which nodes are up above the grain surface, and whether they're reporting if number 1 is down at the bottom or up at the top. Those seem like little minor details, but when you look at the grain quality and storage, it's really important to know what your system's doing. CO2 is a good way to monitor if there's a problem in your bin. If you have a baseline CO2 when you put the grain into the structure, and then you see a rise in CO2 at the discharge of your fan, you know that something's going on in that bin that may cause a problem. You don't really know where it is, but you know that there's a problem someplace, and it's bioactivity of some kind, and it shouldn't be there. So it's a good time to go on an investigation tour and see what's going on within your bin. Record keeping. I know we all just grumbled when we saw that word, record keeping. Why do I need so many stinking records? Well, our first response is OSHA requires it, and sometimes we look at OSHA as being the enemy, but in many times the things that they suggest are good things that we need to follow as well, is with most things right someplace in between, the middle. But records keep you on track, and believe me, if you ever have an incident that ends up in the court of law, those records will save you millions of dollars. You've got to be able to protect yourself, to show what you did. If you didn't write it down, it didn't happen, even if the whole company testifies to the fact it did. Got to keep those records. It also keeps you on track with your timing. Keep records on your maintenance. When did you grease the bearings? When did you last clean? Did you repair a piece of equipment? Where are your bin entry permits? When were they filled out and who did it? Your training records. It's not enough to know that someone attended training. We need to know what was contained in that training, who presented it, and what was covered in that training. As I've worked a few law cases recently, I've found out how important record keeping is, even outside of the OSHA requirements. It's just essential. It's got to be part of your everyday habits within your facility. If you've got some grain that is obviously going out of condition, maybe it came in poor quality, maybe something happened within the facility out of your control, or we had a lapse in management, move that grain out as quickly as you can. We need to break up the problems, either move it to another bin or market it as quickly as you can. Okay, let's look at some new equipment that we can use to help with keeping our people safe and our grain in good condition. Some of the problems we have to fix, let's try to fix them from outside. I'm going to go through a few problems here and then offer some equipment or some ideas to help with that. Obviously, breaking up chunks to go down into our reclaim system is just a real priority for us. So the things that we can do to break up those chunks without sending an employee in would really be helpful. Dislodging stuck grain up on the walls. When we have condensation that goes down the walls, particularly in steel bins, we get material that's stuck to the wall. And it doesn't have to be a whole half the bin stuck to the wall to be a danger. A 2-foot piece can actually come down and injure someone in the bin. So anytime the grain is above a person's head, of course, if you look at the OSHA guidelines, it says if you're in 4 feet or more grain, it's hazardous, and it's up above your head, it's hazardous. That doesn't have to be directly above your head. If it's up on the wall 50 feet away, it can cause a landslide that causes you to be standing in more than 4 feet of grain, or in fact, completely engulfed. So I think there's some chance for misinterpretation because of the OSHA guidelines and how vague they are in this hazardous, deciding whether it's a hazardous situation or not. But if you look into a bin and you see grain that could possibly cause a landslide, or a chunk could fall off and cause grain to move inadvertently and come down onto an employee, that's a problem. And if we can dislodge that from outside the bin, man, that would be a good thing to do. Our zero-entry sweeps, some of them have clod breakers. You can go out on the web and Google those. I'm sure there's going to be examples of those in the exhibit hall at GEAPS in New Orleans. I'm a big fan of zero-entry sweeps. They keep a lot of our employees out of the bins during cleaning and emptying these bins. They're well worth their investment. A zero-entry sweep is something that has a tractor on it. It's a lot more robust than the sweeps that we've used in the past. They run without getting jammed as often. They keep our employees out of the bin, and they also handle our grain in a lot faster and neater way. So if you're thinking about a zero-entry sweep, I would encourage you to look carefully at those and pick one to put in your facility, because I think they're a really good investment. The aeration control and monitoring systems have shown that they will pay for themselves in about 2 years. That's what our economists tell us. The only job that an aeration control system has is to sit there and decide whether it's a good time to run the aeration system all day and all night. And that saves you a lot of manpower. It saves some training on your employees' parts, because you don't have to have them be experts at knowing about this air and grain interaction, because a control system or aeration system is meant to do that. So it's like having an employee that's dedicated to that bin, to running your aeration and keeping your grain in good condition. So that's my plug for aeration control systems. The reality is, especially out on the farm, we don't have very many of those. Our control systems are human. So we just need to make sure that we have the education to know when we're doing a good thing by running the aeration and when we're not. We also need to pay attention to those temperature cables, because they can give us some indications that are really important about what's going on in the bin. If you've got a thermocouple that's showing 200 degrees, that's probably a problem in the grain. When a thermocouple goes bad, it usually shows 256 because it's an electronic thing. So if you see an area that is monitoring more than what it was the day before, and perhaps more than what the ambient or the outside temperature is, you've got a problem in the bin. And it's so these monitoring systems really tell you a lot about what's going on in your bin. I've known a lot of managers, and well, I won't say a lot of managers, a few managers, and probably it's nobody that's on this call, I'm real sure, that they've got temperature cables and they never monitor them. So that's like having an employee that's dedicated to your grain. So take advantage of it. You've got a really powerful tool there. Insect monitoring. Sometimes we don't do that very well, and it's probably more important in the southern part of the United States than folks up north. When I talk insects up north, I get glazed eyes because you put you harvest your grain in the fall, you put it in a cold bin, and it's cold itself, and then you market it before it warms up in the summer many times. And so you don't feel our pain about insects that we have here in the South, but for us it's a big deal. And it's important to know what insects you have and how to remedy those problems without endangering your employees or the people who are around your bins. So some of the other equipment that's available. We've all seen advertisements for different whips and drills, and I was contacted just this week by a company that has a product that will break up the bridges. It looks like something that is a very viable piece of equipment. None of these do us any good unless you buy them or have access to them. So go out and look to see what's available and what fits your budget. I think they're well worth their money so that you can break up some of these problems that eventually will happen. Sooner or later, you're going to have chunks in your bin, even if you're a great manager. It just happens to us. But there is equipment that can be used to, and services. Many of these manufacturers also have a service where they'll bring the tool out and run it for you, and you pay a rental on it, and so you don't have to make the big investment. Anything to break up these chunks without sending a person into the bin is a good thing. Grain backs used to move grain that won't go down into your reclaim system or to clean out the last little bit, or some bins just don't work well with a reclaim system. Grain backs are a really good way to remove that grain, to move the problems. However, they are slow, so keep that in mind. But knowing where the closest grain back is and how you can get it quickly is important. If you ever have anyone who's entrapped, a grain back is just a tool that's vital to a rescue. So make sure you know where one is if you don't have one yourself. CO2 blasters are something that you'll see in the advertisements for remediation equipment. In fact, one group I was working with had not cleaned out their bin for 5 years. Of course, we had a discussion about that, and they had not fumigated corn in Oklahoma for 5 years, and so you can imagine what that corn looked like after the insects got done with it, where we actually went in and used CO2 blasters to dislodge the caked on material. It works kind of like an explosive does. It's a high impact particle that goes into the chunks. I don't know a better way to explain that, and it dislodges those chunks and disassembles the chunks. So it's another option for you. Bin bots to move the grain from the bottom of the bin over into the reclaim system. There's some nice products out in the market for that. We have moving floors. That's more of something that you look at when you're putting a bin into operation. But they have some good things about them too. There are some challenges with moving floors and with vibrators and the air blasters that they can do a really good job if you're handling a product that notoriously is going to give us some problems with removing them from the bin. Another product available now that I think deserves some close attention is the inflatable bladders. Again, these go in the bottom of your bin, and as you're unloading the bin, they inflate to move the outside edges of the grain at the floor into the middle to the reclaim system. So that's all equipment that is designed specifically to move our product into the reclaim system without anyone having to go in the bin and risk their life to do that. Okay, let's go on to the next slide here. I hope you can still see that. My screen says that you can. So another thing about prevention that we need to spend some time with is training. Whether you're a farm storage person or whether you're part of a commercial facilities, training is just so important. Are we doing it right? Well, the reason I've got a football picture there with that poor referee is, do our football teams watch a 15-minute performance video once a year and then never practice? No, they don't. We wouldn't even think about that being an option. However, many facilities are requiring their employees to watch the yearly video for 15 minutes. We can check the box for OSHA that, yes, we did training, and we put them back out into a dangerous facility or into a dangerous environment, and we've never practiced. We've not got the muscle memory to do what we need to do properly. The employee may not get the importance of what we're teaching him if we're only willing to spend 15 minutes a year on it. What message does that send to our employees? So we wouldn't think about playing football or practicing playing football without doing some practice. So I don't think we need to expect our employees to perform well without having some hands-on drills. Do they know what bin entry procedures are for your company? Do they know that there's a permit and how important that permit is, and the items that are on it are their checklists to keep them safe and to go home at the end of the day? Do you sit around and have what-if scenarios? At a family farm, that looks like sitting at the dinner table with the family and saying, okay, what if Dad all of a sudden gets pulled down into flowing grain? What does the teenage son need to do or teenage daughter need to do? What if the tractor rolls over on Grandpa out mowing hay? What do you do? Who do you call? Just these what-if scenarios, they seem kind of bleak, but a person having thought about that in the past gives them at least something to think about when they're under the stress of an incident. Need to teach people about grain handling basics, what to expect inside a grain bin, what the air quality should be, what is the angle of repose, and what does good grain look like. Most of us know what bad grain smells like, but we need to know what good grain looks and smells like also. So these are things that we need to spend adequate time. What is adequate? Well, that's kind of the key. But if we've not got experiential learning going on, some drills going on, that 15-minute performance video once a year just isn't going to get the job done. We've talked about new equipment, but I think we need to talk about techniques and attitudes as well. I wrote down this quote as I was watching one of the FFA students' videos on YouTube about cleaning out the family grain bin. They were putting the sweep auger in through the door, and he was having a little bit of a struggle getting it through the access point, and he hollered out, "Is anybody down there that can help me?" "Well, blanket, I'll just do it myself." Well, you know, that's not the right attitude. That's a very dangerous attitude. We all think we're strong enough to do, maybe we have done it by ourselves for years and years and years, and it was safe. Nothing happened. I don't know if it was safe, but maybe nothing happened until it does, and it only takes once to be a real tragedy. So this attitude is something that we've got to impress upon our employees, and in fact with ourselves, that we aren't Superman, and we do need to have somebody. We always have a partner at the door and be in communication at all times. That partner cannot leave to go get you a drink of water, to go get you a shovel, to go check on something. That partner needs to be right there, joined to you through communication at all times. If you can be entrapped in 20 seconds, that partner, he doesn't have much time to respond. So he needs to be there. He needs to be trained as to what to do if something goes wrong in your world. He needs to be just as efficient in his training as you are in the process you're doing inside the bin. Some process changes that need to happen, if they're not already happening in your facility, is lockout, tagout, no exceptions. I can't think of a situation where we've lost a person. Of the cases that I've worked recently, where lockout, tagout was at least questioned. In many cases, it was not used. If there's rotating equipment that's moving grain either in or out of the bin, even if that piece of equipment is not in the bin itself, it needs to be de-energized and locked out. Now, OSHA has backed off some on their sweep auger situation that we had a few years ago, and made some exceptions with some grading sizes and sweep auger attachments or the arrangements with the guarding. So be sure you make yourself familiar with that. But the best way to keep incidents from happening is just to lock out that equipment. Yes, it takes longer. I know it takes longer to empty a bin, but not near as long as it's going to take if you lose somebody down into that reclaim system and they die. So anyway, lockout, tag out is the way to go. Air quality monitoring is something we need to do every time we go into a bin. Do you have enough oxygen? Is there CO2 in the bin? Is there methane gas in the bin? Depending on the product that you're handling, different gases can be there. Just because the air quality was good an hour ago doesn't mean it's good now. So every time you enter that bin, check the air quality, especially if grain's gone bad in the bin. We're moving grain out, we're uncovering different areas in the bin that may have compromised quality. The air quality can be compromised at that point. Doesn't happen very often, but it is a possibility, and we don't want it to happen to you. Excuse me, having written housekeeping procedures, that goes along with why do I need so many stinking records. If you write down when you cleaned that particular bin or cleaned a part of your facility, it's a whole lot more likely to get done on time the next time. We lose track of time because we're all busy, and we'd sure rather be doing a lot of other things besides cleaning house, I know. But it's just essential to keep housekeeping up. Sweep out your bins well, clean them out well when you unload them. Make sure the dust is contained and removed. OSHA guidelines basically are written. If you can write your name in dust, it's too much. Man, that's hard to come by. I hope they never come to my house. But housekeeping is just essential, and it is required by OSHA for certain places in your facilities. Your facility needs to have written bin entry process and procedures and cleaning out procedures. They need to be written. That means that there's intentional thought gone into those procedures, and that your employees have something to review, something you can train with. Plus, each one of you expects the other person to know the same thing and be doing the same thing. So spend some time developing some procedures, even if it's for on the farm. The family needs to know. Your employees that you hire temporarily need to know what's included, and how are we going to do this, and what can I expect another person helping me to be doing. What's a discipline policy? Well, if somebody doesn't follow your procedures and guidelines, what are you going to do? You just pat them on the back and say, do better next time? Sometimes that works with an employee, sometimes it doesn't. But there needs to be some kind of teeth in your procedures. Are you going to fire them the first time? Well, that's the call that you make as a manager. But it's important that they know that the ultimate discipline is the loss of their life. And if they do not follow your company or your facility's guidelines, they darn sure need to be. And it's up to you as a manager to enforce that. It's not only the employees, but the managers that we have to have in participation with training. The welfare of the workers must be number one. Without your people, your facility does not function. That grain's not going to be taken care of if you don't have good people that are working for you safely. Buying equipment to make it a safer work environment, it's a whole lot cheaper than an incident. Yes, those zero entry sweeps are expensive. Aeration controllers are expensive. Temperature cables are expensive. Training is expensive. But it's a whole lot cheaper than having an incident, believe me. Management, support and require that training. If the top level management in a company does not support this activity of in-depth training, it's hard to get the funding and the time to do it. that attitude filters down through a company, and it is contagious. So management needs to be on board with that training. As an employee, what do you do if they're not? Well, you do the best you can to encourage them to, and then you just make sure you take care of yourself. But it's just majorly important that management's on board. Management needs to understand the tie between everything they do when it comes to marketing, handling, buying, selling, keeping grain, what the tie between that action is and the safety and welfare of their employees. It is a system. It's a system from the minute that the purchaser buys the grain and brings it into the facility, the farmer delivers it at the elevator, you move it into storage, you take care of it, you move it out to market it or move it to another bin. That's all part of a system, and every single action is tied to the safety and welfare of your employees. From the employee side, you need to seek and suggest training. As an employee, make yourself aware of what the journal articles are telling you, what's in the magazines, what you hear from other employees. Seek and suggest training. Be proactive to take care of yourself. Hopefully there's a see-say mentality. And when I say see-say, what I mean is what you see that's wrong or needs to be changed or is good, say something about it. Not all employees feel safe in doing that. And in Oklahoma, what I have observed is many of our non-English speaking employees don't feel like they can say something about something they see that's not right because they feel like they're going to get fired. So from the management side, make these employees feel like they're safe to say something, even if it doesn't turn out to be anything. They need the confidence to be able to say something about what they see. Employees need to be responsible for themselves and for their partners. Keep an eye on each other, the buddy system. Be prepared. It's your job as an employee to prepare yourself to keep your protective gear in shape. Don't put your full body harness in the bottom of the pickup and with the oil cans and all. Make sure it's taken care of and that it's in good working condition. Your safety is your responsibility also. If you don't know about a situation, whether it's safe or not, ask a question. Take the time. I know in harvest and certain times during the year when we're loading out a train or whatever, time is of the essence, and it just kind of trumps some of the things we do. If we don't know, if we're not certain about something, or if you get that hair on the back of your neck raising feeling, stop and ask. Is this a good situation? Is it safe? Am I doing it right? Take the extra 5 seconds to question that and make a decision. And don't take shortcuts. You know, we've stepped over that rotating PTO shaft for 60 years in our lifetime. Never gotten hurt, so I'll do it one more time because I'm in a hurry. We just can't do that. Our equipment moves grain and acts so much faster and in bigger quantities now than it ever has, and we don't see an end to that increase anytime soon. Things just happen so much faster, and when they do, it's just such a life-ending or a life-altering situation. There's no small accident or incident in our industry anymore, so we just can't take those shortcuts. Where do we get good training, and what are the records that we need to keep, and how do we make all this happen? Well, if you've got 10 or more employees throughout the year, you lie under the OSHA 1910-272 grain handling standards auspices. So make yourself, management, make yourself aware of what's in those standards, what their limitations, what their goals are, what the intent of those standards are. You need to be experts on that and create an atmosphere that allows your employees to report if they see a violation or a question about those standards. Be diligent in following the rules. Set those rules, make sure your employees understand what those rules are, and then be really diligent about following them. Train and retrain your employees. Remember the football rule. Employees, make yourself familiar with the OSHA standards. That way, when you see something, you know whether it's a good thing or not. Follow the rules. Report violations. That see-say attitude needs to be in place in your facility. and ask questions again. If you don't understand what's in the grain handling safety standards, there's an awful lot of references out on the web now that can help you with that. Always be alert. Don't ever let your guard down, even at 2 in the morning when you're working to unload a bin. You just always be alert. Take care of yourself. If you're a non-commercial facility or you have under 10 employees, it's going to look a lot the same. You just aren't written up on OSHA violations if something happens. So again, know what they are, be diligent in following them. Is OSHA the end all to every incident we're ever going to have? No, it's not. It's not perfect. It's a living standard. You'll see changes come down the line. You'll see interpretations that change our industry from time to time. But there are some good suggested ideas in those safety standards. Now, I'm not saying that the safety standards are suggestions. They are not. You are required to follow them if you're in a commercial facility. But their intent and many of the guidelines that are in OSHA are good. And so adopt the ones that fit with your facility if you're a non-commercial facility, and look at the intent of the rest of them. Make sure your employees and your family understand those. And the red letters there, let someone know if you're going into a bin. Never ever work alone. I've seen several incidents, not just in Oklahoma, all over the country, had they had someone with them that could have either helped them do the job, or once they got entrapped, could have helped them escape a little earlier. It would have been a good day instead of a bad day. Training, here's the things we need to cover. How to operate all of your equipment, lockout, tag out, what's your procedures, and how do we do that with our equipment. What guards need to be in place and when, where are those guards kept, how do we install them correctly, what electrical precautions do we have, what's the fall protection required for the individual's job, what protective equipment is available, how to use it, how do we put it on properly and quickly. Air quality monitoring, how do we do that? How do we run and maintain the monitors that we use to do that? From the operations side, it's some of the things that we've already talked about. What are our procedures for cleaning, from bin emptying? What kind of chemicals are we going to use? Does your facility use a lot of phosphine? How do we store that? How do we handle it? Who gets to handle it? And what are the requirements on fumigation licensing? What equipment is available? Do you have a cofferdam at your facility? I'm here to tell you that the fire department having a cofferdam is a good thing, but they don't get there fast enough. If you've got an employee that's entrapped or engulfed, especially in grain, you can't wait 30 minutes for the volunteer fire department to get there with their cofferdam. That's a recovery at that point. That's not a rescue. So cofferdams can be made for the cost of one sheet of plywood. They're not elegant, maybe a one-time use thing, but at least you have something in your facility that you can get to an employee quickly with until the expert rescuers get there. Train with your local fire department. That fire department needs to know what chemicals you have, where your electrical service is. Create a friendship with them, so when they show up, they feel like they're a partner with you. They'll listen to your manager. When they roll up to your facility, they don't have to respond. They can say it's outside of their expertise, and you're on your own at that point. That's a legal thing for them to do if they don't feel like they're skilled enough to do what needs to be done in that facility. So help them obtain the equipment and training that they need as well, because that will certainly help your facility's safety. Where do you get training? Information is available, of course, through your GEAPS chapters, websites, lots of websites out there. Most of the land-grant universities have information and services available for training. There are several commercial vendors and consultants that are very good at what they do, and they can come out and help you develop a training program. And your fire departments all have access to training, mostly through their land-grant universities. Speaking of training, this is my plug for the GEAPS Exchange. We will have grain engulfment demonstrations in the exhibit hall, and you can see the times there down in New Orleans. We have a semi-trailer that we'll be bringing down, and if you want to volunteer to be engulfed, I can promise you so far we've got 100% recovery rate on everybody that's been entrapped, and we plan to keep that during New Orleans. So we would love to have you stop by our demonstrations and see what our fire folks, fire services training is in partnership with Biosystems and Ag Engineering. And we will be there demonstrating the equipment and the techniques for getting someone out of a bin, and also to talk about how to keep employees from going into bins, what we need to have in place, and the grain quality required for that. And with that, Kendall, I would really like to visit with these folks and see what questions they have.
Thank you so much for your great presentation today. This concludes the presentation portion of today's event. We will now begin our Q&A session. If you have not yet submitted your questions, please do so now. Okay, Dr. Carroll, do you think that zero bin entry is a possibility in the near future?
No. I guess I should qualify that. It depends on under what activity is zero entry expected. At some point in time, someone's going to have to go into the bin to clean it out, to do repairs. Now, I've heard managers say our state requires zero entry, so we just contract it out. Well, that's not zero entry. You're still responsible for that contractor that comes on your location and does the work for you, and he's going in the bin, so that's not zero entry. I think we can reduce entry and get really close to zero entry with equipment. So hopefully we can approach zero entry, but I think it's going to be really tough.
Okay, next, let's see here. What do you think is the ideal frequency for safety training for employees?
I think every 6 months at least. The quarterly would be great. They need to have the muscle memory that when they're in a situation, they don't have to go get the manual or think twice about what they're going to do. They should automatically kick in, where's our cofferdam? How I need to be handling this lifeline so that there's no slack in it. And just what we've learned through the different learning mechanisms for different people is that hands-on training is, frequent hands-on training, that muscle memory is just essential for most employees. So I'd like to see it quarterly, but at least twice a year.
Okay. Our next question. Can you let me know where we can find information on electronic insect monitors?
Yes. Actually, if you'll Google them out on the web, they're available. There's a company that actually makes those, and being from the university, I really can't give a lot of company names, but if you'll go out on the web and Google electronic grain insect monitors, there'll be a company that comes up and that can offer that.
Okay, our next question.
They also make aeration controllers, if that helps. So.
Okay, next. Do you think that hopper trailers over 4 feet tall with sloped floors are confined spaces, and should these be listed in a confined space program?
Oh, that's a tough question, because we could debate what's a confined space for a couple of weeks at least. In our area, they are not really considered confined space. They are a dangerous space. So I'll kind of encapsulate it with that, because we have had more incidents in Oklahoma in hopper bottom vehicles than anything. But to actually consider them a confined space depends on the construction of the grain cart. It depends on how it's used, and in most states they're not considered confined space.
Okay, our next question. Where can I get sample written plans?
National Grain Feed Association has some of those available. We have some available here at OSU. I'm sure some of the other land grants do. But NGFA is a really, really good place to go to get examples of procedures, policies. They have some bid entry permit examples out there. That's where I would start to look for examples.
Okay, can you give a few more details about what goes on in your grain bin engulfment demonstration?
Sure. We will have several things going on at the same time. We have two confined space areas in the bin where we'll actually have someone in there, and these are made to where there's no way that person could ever be completely engulfed, and they're easy to get out if something goes wrong, if they have a health issue or whatever. But anyway, we're going to engulf someone, generally up to the waist, and then we will have one bin that has a ladder made tripod. So we're going to show you how to use two ladders to make a anchor point above the bin, or above the bin opening. And then the other bin, the other confined space, will have a tripod set up over it. And we'll put a cofferdam in around these individuals, and we'll show you how to handle all the ropes and what equipment that your rescuers and employees should have on, and we'll actually extract that person out. At the same time, we'll have demonstrations on what the V's, if you have to cut into the side of a bin, what those V's need to look like and how many you should have, where they should be located to drain the grain out of a bin. We'll also be doing demonstrations on how to make the ladder, A-frame ladders, so that you can use that as an anchor point. We'll be talking about anchor points, the importance of anchor points in bins to handle lifelines. So those are some things you can expect.
Okay, our next question. Should regulators pursue bin entry and safety training for the farmer level, and if so, how?
It's really hard. It's a hard discussion to have with regulation on farmers. Personally, I'd like to see it done, but it's not something that's popular with our legislatures, and I don't think we're ever going to get that done. And there's a lot of good reasons for that. The same way with training of fire departments. We would not have any volunteer fire departments if we required the legal training involved. So you have to strike a happy medium there. I sure wish we could get more training to farmers. If I can talk to their wives and their kids, more times than not, we'll get the information to the farmer. That if you're expecting to train directly to a farmer, it is a tough thing to do. And if somebody's got a good idea on how to do that, I would sure like to talk with them, because I need help in that area as well. But legislating it is going to be a really tough thing to do, and enforcing it would be even tougher.
Okay, that is all the time that we have for questions today. I want to thank everyone for their participation. If your question was not answered live today, it will be sent forward to our presenter. That is all that we have for today. I want to go ahead and thank our sponsors, M&M Specialty Services and VAA LLC, for their support in bringing you today's webinar. I also want to thank GEAPS and our presenter, Dr. Carol Jones, for joining us today.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you so much, and we'll see you at GEAPS.
Yeah, see you then. As a reminder, this webinar has been recorded and it will be available for viewing on grainnet.com within 24 hours. All registrants will also receive an email containing a link to the recording and our presentation slides. Our next webinar will be held on Thursday, March 21st at 2 p.m. Central Time. Kia Adams-Mikesh, Vice President of NDGI, will be discussing getting the most of the official grain grading system. I want to thank you all for attending and wish you all a great day.